The time I was tackled to the ground by a stranger on the subway. I am a graduate student, 23F, living in a major city in the US. Over the summer, I would often walk to campus to avoid taking public transportation because of the pandemic. However, I had to do mandatory COVID testing off campus twice a week, meaning that on some days I'd take the subway to get around efficiently. On the morning in question, I went to get a COVID test and then hopped on the train for what is usually a 5 to 10 minute ride. At this time I was hyper-COVID aware and actively trying not to touch anything in the car, so I was standing facing the window and occasionally wrapping my arm around one of the poles to steady myself. All was well until right after the first stop. Shortly after, I noticed a man who had been sitting behind me get up and stand about 3 seats away. He quickly turned to face me. I glanced at him and then abruptly looked away, realizing he's one of those people on public transport that you probably don't want to make eye contact with. I didn't so much as look in his direction again for the rest of the trip, which was only about 5 minutes. At my stop, I got off and made my way towards the stairs. And then, I was on the ground. The only way for me to convey how quickly this happened and how unanticipated it was is to say that I didn't have a conscious thought until I was squarely on the ground. Creepy subway guy had taken a running start off the train behind me and body slammed me to the ground with all the energy he could muster. Surveillance footage, we'll get to this part later, showed him nearly trip past me from the impact, although he steadied himself before he could fall. I was knocked cleanly off my feet and hurtled forwards, landing on my side, which resulted in a nasty bruise on my elbow that lasted for some time. You know how people talk about fight, flight, or freeze? I experienced none of the above. The only thing I felt was confusion. After the initial impact, he did not approach me again. In this respect, I got very lucky. The platform was empty, and there was still some time before the train doors would close. I pushed myself up to a seated position and looked back at the train. He emerged into my field of view, now back on the train car. He was wearing a mask, but I could tell he was laughing. This was a very difficult time in my life, as I'm sure it was and still is for most of us, and something about the absurdity of the situation broke me. I'd had it. I pulled down my mask, looked him dead in the eye, and asked a simple question: what the fuck? He didn't answer, but he did have time to flip me off before the doors closed and the train sped away. I got up and tried to process what happened as I made my way toward campus, where there was usually a police officer out and about. I was able to find an officer quickly and relay what happened, and he called the subway police, who took an official report. This is around where most L&M stories end, but we're not done yet. I continued on to lab. I'm a biomedical engineering student, and spent a regular day at work before heading home. Yes, I decided to take the subway to get home. I was exhausted, and at that point it seemed like a much better option than walking for 40 minutes in the heat, despite the day's events. As I got onto the platform, I noticed the silhouette of someone familiar. Creepy subway guy was far away on the opposite end, head down looking at his phone. I doubted myself for a moment, what are the odds, but quickly sprang into action. I stepped backwards so I was shielded by the stairs, keeping an eye out as I waited for the train. At this point the station was much more populated and I was completely out of his line of sight. In writing this out, it probably sounds insane that I didn't GTFO immediately, but I did not feel I was in immediate danger. After the train pulled up, I waited to see if he would board, and when he did not, I hopped on at the last second. When I got off at my stop, I called the subway police to report his whereabouts, and they were able to find and ID him. However, they were not able to arrest him because the crime he committed, simple assault/battery, is a misdemeanor, not a felony. Within a few days I got a call from a detective with the subway police, who was able to find the incident on surveillance footage. After some initial questioning, I had trouble getting back in contact. A few months later, I got a voicemail stating that creepy subway guy had been arraigned in court. They issued a no-contact order, criminal version of a restraining order, and placed him on an ankle bracelet to ensure that he follows that order. I ended up playing phone tag with the court for a little while, but gave up as finals season was underway. Overall, I am very pleased with this outcome, especially since if I hadn't gone back to the station that day, he likely never would have been identified. Fortunately, I have not encountered creepy subway guy again, and in the future, let's not meet. Since I didn't have a good place to fit this in above, I ended up with what you would probably call minor injuries from this incident. I had some bruising around my elbows and hips from where I hit the ground, and a few days of neck pain from whiplash. Followed on the subway. Hi, this is my first post, so I'll do my best to make this interesting. This happened to me in the summer of 2015. I was dating a guy who lived in the city and I was living at home at the time in the suburbs. Neither of us had a car, and since I lived at home with my bedroom right next to my grandma's, I always went to him. I'd take the subway to his place every week and stay for the couple of days I had off from work. To get to his apartment required taking 2 trains. One day I was headed to see him. It was super hot out and I was wearing a skirt with straps, a crop top and knee-high socks. Hey, I wanted to look cute. I guess I feel this is important as I probably stood out in this outfit, and unfortunately I probably should have been more careful about what I was wearing. Which sucks. Anyway, I'm on the first train and after a few stops I notice a man get on. I kind of couldn't not notice him as he chose to stand right in front of where I was sitting and stare at me, rather than take an empty seat. It made me feel weird. The man in general gave me a very creepy vibe. He was probably on his 40s, looked unkempt but otherwise kinda just a basic looking white dude whose face I can't even picture now. So I get off at the last stop and head through the station to where I need to catch the second train, but I noticed this guy is following me, which at first I figured wasn't a big deal. He could have been just going to the same place. So to get to the platform I needed to be, you have to go up some stairs, and I realize he's right behind me. I decided to turn around and go to a different platform, which happened to be packed with people. Thinking if he follows me then this is bad, but maybe I can lose him in the crowd. He follows me and I try to duck out of view before going back to the actual platform I needed to be waiting on. I get there and for a few minutes I feel better, until I see him again. He must have known I'd be there after I'd gone up there and then turned around. Plus it was the only other platform and most likely he saw me the whole time. There weren't too many people waiting compared to the other side, but a few trains came that were so full I didn't bother to try to get on, and neither did he. The whole time I am texting my BF, who is not taking me seriously at all. I asked he at least meet me at the station when I got to the stop by his apartment, a 5-minute walk, and was being reluctant but agreed finally. At this point though I'm still waiting for a train. One comes that's very full, but I'm getting restless and want to get to a safe place, so I squeeze on, and so does the man right next to me with his arm over me. I decide that even with all these people around I'm not safe, so right before the doors close I hop out and the train leaves with the guy on it staring at me as it pulled away. I waited for a few more trains to come and go, worried the guy would be waiting for me at the next stop or something. I got on a train finally, paying attention to everyone who got on at each stop. He never did, and I made it to my stop greeted by my BF, who seemed put out by having to walk over. He is an ex-BF and was generally kinda shitty. I'm really proud of myself for getting off the train at the last second. I don't know how much danger I was in, but I know that man was following me and definitely wasn't for any wholesome reason. And despite being in public, I feel like if he had tried anything no one would have done shit, and I am a very small and not strong person. Okay, well, thank you for reading. I have another story about a stalker that's got a lot of details. I'd be happy to share it if anyone is interested, I just need to condense it. Terrifying experience on the NYC subway. I've lived in NYC all my life, and I have countless stories that I can tell you about this city, but this one takes the cake for sure. I live in one of the safest and most affluent neighborhoods in all of Brooklyn, near the Verrazano Bridge. My friends and I, being high school students at the time, would use fake IDs to get into this college bar in Manhattan most weekends. There is one train line that serves my neighborhood, and even then it's a decent walk to get to the nearest station. On this night, my friends and I left our neighborhood and boarded the train. Everything was totally fine on the way to the bar. It's one straight shot ride there, and we had a pretty decent time. I left the bar at around 3 in the morning, and my friends decided that they would all stay at one of my friends' grandparents' houses in the neighborhood next to mine as to not get caught by their parents, which was served by a different train line. We boarded the train headed toward my neighborhood, but my friends disembarked about 7 or 8 stations before I needed to get off so that they could transfer to the other train line. As I said before, my neighborhood is very affluent and most people do not use the subway and opt for cars instead. It's semi-suburban. Imagine a mix of New Jersey and a scene out of Saturday Night Fever. Therefore, I was the only person in my car. 2 stops after my friends left the train, a man wearing a stuffed black backpack entered the car and sat down in one of the corner seats, next to an advertisement plastered on the wall. I paid little attention to him, but anyone boarding the train at 3 a.m. in my area would be kind of unnerving, especially because of his shabby appearance. Not homeless, but he definitely had not showered for a few days. My eyes stayed glued to my phone for about 5 minutes, until my attention was ripped away from AFK Arena due to the man removing a large permanent marker from his backpack. He began writing on the advertisement and smiling at me every so often, as if he wanted me to acknowledge whatever he was scribbling down. The man began by drawing a hanged man with several religious crosses surrounding him, and then began to write phrases on the advertisement. The end is near, you will pay for your sins, the awakening is upon us, etc., etc. Normal things for a super religious person to say or write, even if it was unnerving that this was happening at 3 a.m. in an empty train car. I tried to shrug the situation off because I did not want to freak myself out, as I tend to overthink things like this. However, the next time I looked up at the advertisement, he had written, "Make sure you check behind you on your way home," and gave me that unnerving smile once more. At this point, I freaked the fuck out. I was still semi-drunk and my anxiety disorder was not helping anything to the situation at hand. I got up and moved to the opposite end of the car. My station was next, so I thought that I was just dealing with some loony and that I'd be fine. As I exited the train, the man exited as well. Now here's where I really felt like I was in danger. He was following me, with a blank face. No smile, no making sure that I was paying attention to his actions, just blank. I began briskly walking through my silent neighborhood. No one was out, it was 3 a.m. for fuck's sake. The man trailed behind me with his backpack my entire way home, and I made sure to double lock my doors once I got inside. I didn't tell my mom because I knew she would have had 10 times the panic attack that I did on that train. When I entered my room, I peered out the window. There the man was, staring blankly at my front door. He stood there for about 5 minutes before leaving, trailing off into the darkness. I have no idea what the man wanted from me, or why he followed me off of the train. To this day I still make myself believe that he simply was deranged or had some sort of mental illness, not that he had any sinister intentions. Weird stalker Bible freak on the subway. Let's not meet again.